Welcome to the Modern Love Podcast, episode 3. And if you don't know me, I am your host, Manj Bara. I am a neuroscience-based dating coach who shares proven tips and tricks that will help you create change in your life. And if you're a regular listener, then thank you for coming back. I think we need some intro music. So if anyone listening knows how to make that happen, please do get in touch. But more importantly, today we have an awesome topic that I know a lot of people are going to love. And that's how to build self-worth so you can attract higher quality relationships. So if you're a person who ever feels like you're not good enough or struggle with how you feel about yourself and can't seem to attract the right person, today is going to be really useful for you, as I'll be showing some practical steps backed by science and psychology to increase your self-worth and transform your dating life. We'll start with diving into what self-worth is and why it matters. I'll spend a few minutes on where it comes from and then focus on the action you can take every day to make it happen. And before we get into it, if you haven't already, please do hit that follow button. It really helps the podcast, shows me people are listening, they want to hear more, and obviously it gets me closer to that 100 million Spotify deal. All right, no more plugs from me. Let's start with the basics. What is self-worth? Now, self-worth is one of those ideas that's thrown around a lot. But a lot of people don't really know what it means or how to think about it. And I think it can be kind of confusing when you have similar terms like self-esteem and self-confidence. So let me just set the scene and give you my take on this. For me, having self-worth is knowing you have inherent value without needing constant validation, approval, or achievement. It's an inner sense that you are enough and don't need something external to prove that. Now, I want to stress one thing here. That doesn't mean you don't want any of those things. Yeah, you can want achievement, want to get better, enjoy approval and validation. It's rather the idea that you don't need them to feel okay about yourself. It's not a binary thing. A person with higher self-worth is far more likely to recover quickly from setbacks and will see them as part of a natural growth, a learning, rather than a proof of inadequacy. In contrast, if you lack self-worth, if you're in that lower end, that's where you really doubt your value and you feel you must earn love, or you kind of focus on achievement all the time, pleasing others, doing something to receive some validation that makes you feel good in that moment. And you become way more prone to self-criticism, you tolerate unhealthy relationships, and deep down there's probably a belief that you don't deserve better. Now, coming back to what I mentioned earlier, how does this relate to self-esteem and self-confidence? I think of those two as branches of self-worth. Self-esteem is how you feel about yourself and the person you're being. Do you like how you see yourself? Kind of similar, but not quite the same. And self-confidence is about the level of trust you have in your ability to do something. And that might vary based on context. You might be confident in your career and less so in relationships. But all of these play a role in dating, but self-worth is the foundation that fuels it all. Now, you might be wondering, where does this originate from then? And some of you probably thinking about friends or family, trying to make sense of the differences. Some people have higher self-worth, some have lower, some in the middle. And as you probably already guessed, a lot of it is shaped by childhood. Attachment theory is one of the most prominent explanations here, and I will do a full episode on this. But in a nutshell, the simplest thing you need to know is that the consistency and quality of care you received as a child does impact how you feel about yourself later in life. And before we all start blaming our parents, it's important to note that a lot of the time, circumstances will have impacted this. It could be work schedules, lack of understanding, tools, resources, cultural elements. Things may have been different when you were growing up. The take home basically here though is that if your needs weren't met reliably, consistently, you won't feel the same way as someone who had that experience. Because a person who's had their needs met very reliably and consistently will feel inherently valuable from a young age. And the other side, it will foster self-doubt or the belief you need to do more to earn love and care. And that will follow through your formative years. It's associated more with those insecure attachment styles. If you're anxious or disorganized, we're more likely to see people with those kinds of styles to feel as though they lack self-worth. And again, it's directly because when you had a need as a child, you couldn't reliably get that care that you needed for whatever reason. So early attachment does play a role, but that's not the only reason. You can be securely attached and still have low self-worth, and that's to do with what you were valued for as a child. Nowadays, new parents are really encouraged to value children for who they are becoming and being, rather than just emphasizing what they're achieving or doing. But let me tell you, when I was growing up in the 90s, and I'm sure many people can relate, especially in a South Asian household, it was not like that. For me and many others, we were valued for academic success, being useful, or being the ideal child, conforming to expectations. There might even have been some brutal comparison to others that left you feeling like you needed to be a bit more like someone else. I know there were one or two kids that my dad compared me with, and it did poke a lot of holes in me for a very long time. I didn't realize how much it impacted me until later, but those comparisons did kind of make me think, oh, I need to do a bit more. And again, all these patterns, they just lead us to this idea of being not enough as we are. And especially if you were different and you didn't follow the norm, it's so easy to internalize there's something wrong with you, something missing that needs to be there to complete you. So if you're someone who struggles with self-worth and you're listening to this now, I'd really encourage you to explore for yourself. Is there a role of your attachment style if you know about that? And it's fine if you don't, we can talk more about that in another episode. But more importantly, just asking yourself, what were you valued for as a kid? Because most people can understand that and relate to it. Was it being great at school? Was it about helping around the house? Did you fix things? Maybe even mediate arguments. I know a lot of middle children did that. What about those comparisons? For those of you with siblings, what do you notice about the ages and differences in self-worth with them? In many cases, the firstborn had the most attention, and those who came after maybe felt pressure to live up to them, or maybe even felt like they couldn't be as perfect as them. Sometimes gender plays a role, especially in my culture. If a boy came along later, that was basically the prince that was promised and they got everything. So there are no absolutes, and I'm hesitant to say everything will be the same for you or another person. It's more about just thinking about your own journey and what are the things that you want to consider. Because ultimately, all of this influences how you feel good about yourself later in life. Rather than asking for your needs and having them met, you can get into this habit of constantly earning approval through doing or conforming to what people want from you, if that's how you grew up. And that creates that never-ending cycle of not feeling enough, of rescuing and fixing, kind of getting involved in things that you haven't been asked to get ultimately validation. All because we don't know how to feel worthy without doing something, right? And I've had clients who are millionaires, CEOs, achieve so much and still struggle with self-worth because of this pattern. I'm sure we all know someone who ties their self-worth now to an occupation. They could say, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm a VP, I'm a banker. I remember working with people, they were traders, and if they didn't have that, I'm a trader, I'm a Wall Street guy, they would not feel the same way about themselves. It's all based on external validation that can be ripped away at any point. And if you want to sum it up in 2 words, what so many people have learned growing up is transactional love. That they are only worthy of love when they do something to earn it, to receive it. It's always conditional, based on what's happening, rather than a constant. And if you have that, it massively impacts your experience of relationships, but especially romantic relationships. So let's just take a minute now to explore that. Let's have a look at what does self-worth really do in regards to your relationships, your dating life. How does it impact you? And in a nutshell, how you feel about yourself has a direct correlation with the people you attract. If you have low self-worth, you'll be far more likely to accept disrespectful behavior, falsely pedestalize people, see them as perfect when they're not. And you can even end up going after those who are unavailable emotionally. Or even those, actually, if we're honest about it, who you can't have because they might be in a relationship, or they might be long distance, or whatever it is, wherever there's an obstacle. You can self-sabotage in that regard. And you're probably wondering, why would we do that if we know logically it's not good for us? Well, from a neuroscience perspective, we know that your survival brain craves consistency. So whatever story you have about yourself in your head that you've been internalizing for years, your brain tries to maintain it. And a key driver of this is our cognitive biases, our heuristics, these shortcuts, mental shortcuts that make sense of our world quickly, without energy. And 3 of the most powerful in dating: loss aversion, status quo, and the confirmation bias. Put simply, We hate losing what we have for something uncertain, even if it's potentially better. We definitely hate change, and we like to prove our current beliefs even if they are negative. And because of these biases, we end up seeking experiences that confirm our existing self-narratives. And if you have low self-worth and you think you need to prove something or that you're not enough, whatever it is, you will attract partners who will happily play that game with you. You can find yourself in these relationships where you're trying to rescue or save people. You might even end up playing a role like mothering or fathering. You might go after those ones that are unavailable. As I said, you might be chasing people who never want you. And that is the pattern we're talking about. Even though those relationships might be deeply unsatisfying, those patterns might really suck for you, it's actually still a win-win. And I know that sounds crazy, but one thing we are certain of from our understanding of the brain, you can never underestimate how much we prefer things to stay the same, even if it's not a great situation, because it's the devil we know. There's no uncertainty, and from a survival perspective, whatever we've done up until now has kept us alive, and that is what your reptile brain cares about the most. Now, is it always the case? No. Will you always be like that? Not necessarily. There's a great quote from Don Miguel Ruiz. He's the author of The Four Agreements. Fantastic book if you haven't read. He says, and I'm paraphrasing here, "We accept the abuse we give ourselves. It's only when someone treats you worse than you treat yourself that you'll start changing." So in essence, when someone really starts crossing the line, you will have your watershed moment. But what I'm saying to you is that you don't want to wait for that, because if you've spent years criticizing and berating yourself, feeling low about yourself, that could be a really low moment needed for you to cross that line. And so what I hope you're learning from what we're saying here is that your sense of identity, who you see yourself as, plays such a huge role in dating. How you treat yourself is pivotal because it influences what you tolerate for others. And crucially, if you increase your sense of self-worth, you'll start repelling unhealthy and toxic relationships. Those people who used to feel powerful being with you won't want to hang around with you anymore. You won't stand for it or stay stuck in those situations for long because you respect yourself first, and that sends a message about how you expect to be treated by others. And all of these things that we're talking about, these changes, can actually happen very quickly if you take the right steps consistently. So now let's look at what is it you need to do to get to this situation where you have higher self-worth. The first thing to say is certain things won't work. Let's just rule it out quickly. Trying to convince yourself through endless affirmations, staring into a mirror every morning or writing in a journal, "I am worthy," is not going to deliver. And the reason from a science perspective is because your survival brain knows you don't believe it. It's just going to say no. You also can't create this sense of worth through more achievement or finding a dream partner, let's say. We're human and we all have this hedonistic treadmill. Our dopamine cycles means that once you get a new achievement, it becomes normal, and then you just want something a bit more after that. So it's never ending. We go back to core principles, and I always love to think about what can we control. And right now your brain has a very efficient highway called "I'm not enough." It's been consistently used and maintained for a long time. You've been the person maintaining it. It's the primary road in your brain escorting your thoughts to destinations that, while they're familiar, you don't really like. So what we want to do is we want to create a new highway. We want to send our cars there, aka our thoughts, a place where it's a totally different experience, and we want to use this highway more and more so the other one starts falling apart and this becomes our new go-to. And fortunately, your brain has this incredible quality called neuroplasticity, which allows you to do exactly that, to build these new highways. Now, what are the practical steps we can take to make that happen? The first is actually more of an idea. I'd love you just to continually remind yourself, and that's by being human, you have value. Now, you might think, yeah, right. And when I initially heard this, I remember I scoffed, but let me just explain. Hear me out here. Think about this. The odds of you being born are estimated to be about 1 in 400 trillion. That's mind-blowing. Out of countless genetic possibilities and circumstances, you are here. And that alone makes you rare and extraordinary. You beat the rest of the crowd. But going deeper, the real value we bring is our uniquely human capacity to connect deeply with others, to empathize, to truly feel them, and to create space for vulnerability. This is what builds powerful relationships. No achievement machine or status can replicate it. You don't need to earn love, because the greatest gift you can offer somebody is to be authentically present, to listen and accept them as who they are. No fixing or rescuing needed, just humanness. We've all had those moments where someone genuinely saw us, and that simple feeling is what most of us crave. So recognize the power in just being human, because often that's all that's needed anywhere in life. It's an intrinsic worth, and it is so simple. You can remind yourself of this at any time. You have to just let that sink in. You have something that no one else can replicate. You have the ability to be human. That is immensely valuable. But I know some people listening to this are going to be like, I don't know about that. Yeah, give me something else. Give me something more practical. So here's 2 more ideas for you to chew on. Remember, we said that self-worth is about how we treat ourselves as well, and how we allow ourselves to be treated. A great mindset hack here is to practice embodiment. So when you're in a situation that usually triggers, say, self-doubt, or let's talk about dating. Imagine you're being ghosted, you're facing poor treatment, or dealing with someone who won't commit. Pause. Ask yourself, if I truly valued myself, what would I do here? Imagine it like putting on a new pair of shoes. They might feel unfamiliar at first, but every step in them, actually, they become more comfortable. So try it on like that. New shoes that say, if I had valued myself, what would I do? What's the step I take? And take it. And if you're really struggling with what that might feel like, just think of a role model, someone who you kind of admire. You think they've got really high self-respect, high self-worth. What would they do? Just imagine it. You have that capability, I promise. Maybe they'd walk away from inconsistent behavior without feeling the need to earn or chase that love. Understanding that real connection isn't something that you have to go looking for and chasing aggressively. Maybe they know that these situations aren't all about them. They're as much about the other person, where they're at. It's not a definitive statement on your worthiness. And these perspectives that you can access at any time, just by thinking about it in that way, by trying on those shoes, by imagining what it's like, will take you into a different area, and it'll help you see new ways of being that you just haven't accessed before. And as you make these choices, both who you find attractive and who is drawn to you will start to shift. Those who might have taken advantage or sense they won't get what they're after with you. Instead, you might start attracting people who respect your self-worth. Those who see you as a true partner, someone they can build a future with, someone they're attracted to for those positive reasons, not because they're going to feel good by putting you down. And embodiment is the fast track to building this new highway. It works because you give your brain a new bias to prove. And if you try to act against it in that mode, you get cognitive dissonance, that psychological stress, because you're not acting in alignment with who you want to be. And we don't like cognitive dissonance, as we spoke about in the last podcast. We hate it. So instead, you're just going to take a new step. And every new step in this way of being reinforces this new path. And it provides real evidence that reshapes your belief. It goes from theory into your lived experience. It's so important for belief change. And finally, the last thing I'd love for you to do is to start honoring your time and choices. One of the most powerful ways to increase your self-worth is by making choices that actually reflect your values and desires, not what other people expect or choose for you. Every time you prioritize what matters to you, whether it's a hobby, setting time aside for self-care, choosing your friends and company, you reinforce that message, not only to yourself, but those around you, that your time and energy are valuable. And this approach also shifts how you engage with dating. Because when your life is already fulfilling, dating is no longer the only source of validation or excitement. It's not your only hit of dopamine. And you're less likely to rely on that, and because you're already building a life you enjoy. And when you're out doing things you love, you have more chance of organically meeting people, which I know people want to do. They want to be off app and meet in real life. Your focus isn't always on just finding someone, but living in alignment. And when you live in alignment, your energy is so different, it becomes magnetic even. And people who value themselves will be drawn to people like that. And that is how we find lasting, higher quality relationships, in conjunction with all that stuff about breaking those patterns and just realizing you have that worth inherently by being human. Now, if you follow those 3 steps consistently, you will see really big shifts in your dating life, guaranteed. But I have to be honest, it won't be easy at first. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it. And in my experience, people get stuck in 2 areas. First, they compare themselves to others. They look at what another person has and wonder why they have that. What's the reason that it's working for them and not me? And I get it, I've been there. But when we do this, we usually compare unfairly with those who have completely different circumstances. We also heavily downplay the role of luck. Sometimes things just work out for reasons beyond our control. And we often assume we know everything about that situation when you're only seeing a snapshot in time. You don't know the full details and it might change later. And that's why it's so much more prudent to just compare with yourself or someone who's literally like for like, and there are very few people who can be in that scenario. Second, and probably most critically, people do fear what they will lose if they let go of old patterns. There can be this worry that if they stop fixing, rescuing, doing, that no one would be interested. And there is no way to disprove that without finding out for yourself. So remember, you don't have to change anything. If you're happy, that's great. If you're listening to this and you feel a really high sense of self-worth and this is not an issue for you, fantastic. But if you are in that camp where you feel this might be a challenge, it might be something that you actually need to work on, let me tell you this, there is no way around embracing the fear, challenging your stories and taking action. At the end of the day though, the biggest shift isn't always in what you do, it's in simply realizing that being truly you is more than enough and letting that sink in. It's a hard thing for people to try and accept. Whether you're prepared to try it on like those new shoes we just spoke about, that's down to you. Can you let go of your prior identity and feeling useful in the way you know? That might actually be the most important question you ever answer in your life in relation to transforming your dating experiences, to finding the person you want to be with, to finding your life partner. Okay, so let's recap everything. Self-worth is your inherent sense of value. It's knowing that you're enough without needing constant validation, approval, or achievement. This shapes your entire approach to dating, impacts who you're drawn to and who is drawn to you. Our biases confirm our beliefs, and when you have low self-worth, we keep chasing relationships where we feel there's something we need to do to earn love or approval. To increase your self-worth, focus on those 3 steps. First, remind yourself there is value in just being human. Your capacity to connect deeply, empathize, and be present is completely irreplaceable. It's so underrated. It's a gift to give someone. We know how special it feels. Second, embody your worth by making choices that reflect how you want to be treated. Ask yourself what you would do if you were a person with high self-worth, and try it on like those new pair of shoes we keep speaking about. It's a great metaphor. It won't be comfortable at first, but it may be over time. It actually becomes easier and easier. Third, honor your time and choices. Do those things that reflect your values, not what other people want for you, but how you want to spend your time. Make a conscious effort to prioritize yourself. And these changes can absolutely shift your dating life dramatically. When you value yourself, you repel those people who want to waste your time, those people who feel powerful by treating you poorly. And instead, you start attracting those who see how you see yourself and they want to be around you. They like that. Finally, my last point here is just to remember that while change isn't always easy, it's the small, consistent steps that will get you there. People obsess over outcomes. They put so much pressure on themselves. We only focus on what we can control. Process is what gets you the outcome. Consistently taking tiny steps every day compounds and it leads to incredible results if you can stick with it. Try on these ideas I've shared with you today and see where they take you. You will be so surprised at how much you can change with those simple 3 hacks. And if nothing else, just reminding yourself you have value just because you are human. All right, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. Do let me know any feedback and I'll be seeing you again next week. Topic TBD. I'm going to put out a poll on Instagram. Make sure you vote. But thank you for taking the time to listen today and make it happen.